Previously on the Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
You know, I'm incredibly lucky to have the co-founders that I've had, right, in my life. And I think it's been yin and yang with people like David Brown, who I've learned a ton from, but, you know, sort of completed my skill set. You know, anytime someone talks about imposter syndrome, it really doesn't matter who you're talking to because pretty much everyone has it.
It's nefarious, man. Like, the brain works in fucked up ways.
The mind is one of the most deceiving, manipulative pieces of equipment, flesh, human bodies on earth. I never have trusted my brain.
All of that weight lives in your head, and you are the decision maker.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Hi, this is Ronsley. If this is your first volume, welcome. This is a weekly series where I go inside the mind of an entrepreneur, artist, athlete, academic to decipher what is the psychology of our decisions. I'm Australian, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians throughout Australia and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures and to elders past, present, and emerging of the land I'm standing on today. I extend my respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who listen to this podcast. Today, we're going to be releasing another Uncut interview, this time with the creator of Thailand's leading supplier for medical equipment, Winergy Medical. His name is Noom Dara, and he is one of the most humble entrepreneurs I have ever been fortunate enough to connect with. In fact, his name is not even Noom. He didn't want us to talk about his real name because of all the success he achieved. But the point is, his friends call him Noom. In case you missed last week's Uncut volume with David Cohen, my team and I wanted to start rolling these full-length interviews to give you an even deeper dive into the mind of some of our amazing guests. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes when producing a volume for this series. And although we try to provide you with the most significant gems from each interview, it's extremely hard for us to cut them down. There's a lot of incredible advice and stories that unfortunately never ever gets released. Well, until now. Noom Dara is a phenomenal human being, one of the most nicest persons on the planet. And his sense of hospitality is phenomenal. Obviously, he comes from Thailand, which has a rich history of hospitality. But he goes about creating value from an entrepreneur standpoint very differently. With his extensive experience in entrepreneurship, my conversation with Noom highlighted the hurdles and challenges he has faced along the way. He was also really open and honest with me about the mistakes he made early on in his career and how they have shaped him and his business today. Well, enough introduction. Here is me from the past. It's your first interview?
It is my first interview ever, like my first talk ever. So first time for everything.
So MMT is breaking ground?
MMT is breaking ground.
And how do you feel, first of all? I think that's something I'm super curious to know. Like, how do you feel on the last day of Mastermind Talks?
I feel supported. I felt very alone, and I was nervous and really worried about what people would think of my talk. But today, I feel really supported. I feel really connected with this community, even more than all of the previous 2 years I've been here.
Yeah.
Because I have people coming back to tell me afterwards their stories.
Yeah.
And how that connected with my story. Yeah. Or that my story connected with theirs, or is either inspirational or they have something that they felt helped them in some way.
I thought that was fascinating. Just to give context, you're talking about the One Last Talk that you did for the first time. So before I get into the One Last Talk, Noom, how do you introduce yourself when you how would you say, what do you say you do? Like, how would you put that into, because I know there are 3 businesses and I know the core. How would you just for people, so just for the record, just for the audio, if you could say, I am Noom Dara and go on.
And I work my best to help improve the lives of the people of Thailand through the use of technology, which, of course, Thailand doesn't have. So we acquire technologies, or we create the technologies to help improve their quality of life.
I want to kind of put it in perspective, quality of life, because, quality of life changes from place to place and circumstances to circumstances and expectation to expectation as well. What does that mean?
It's hard to define what I do because it involves a lot of industries. But the core of it is not something that is essential. And I don't do anything luxurious, nothing to do with lifestyle branding or something that is not needed. Right. That's how I define improving the quality of life in a meaningful way, in a necessity way, not something that's it's a must. It's a must. It's not.
It's not nice to have. It's not it's not like a luxury. I understand. And just for perspective, I mean, people listen to this show in different parts of the world. How would you classify quality of life in Thailand? How would you say, what would you say is low quality of life versus high quality of life? How would you distinguish that?
When for example, when I started this natural gas business, the price of oil was so high and people are paying, ridiculous amount of money for oil. And at that time, natural gas was just starting to boom. And we got involved in it because I thought that I could do a service to the people of Thailand by helping them save money, for example, because the saving is significant enough. Also, what we do with medical or consumer products. I have, let's say, for example, this consumer products, I'm allergic to mosquitoes. One day I found this mosquito trap. And I thought, well, we have a lot of dengue fever in Thailand. And these dengue fever are caused by the mosquitoes, which can grow exponentially in a short period of time after a rain. So by using our mosquito traps, it cuts off the life cycle because it lures the female mosquito about to lay eggs that needed blood to fertilize to come in, and each mosquito can lay up to 250, 300 eggs.
Yeah.
And by cutting that cycle off, then you through a short period of time, you get rid of most of the mosquitoes, not all, but most of the mosquitoes. And that in turn helped to lower the incidence of dengue fever. So those are kind of the products that I look for, or technologies I look for to help people.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, when you think about mosquitoes, not places in the first world would not know how to kind of relate to that. And when you're talking about mosquitoes, I mean, in the first world, that's hard to imagine.
Yeah, in the subtropics, we see a lot of deaths caused by the dengue fever. So every year you hear stories about that, and I wanted to do something about helping in that field, because to use the traps you don't need to use the mosquito coils, and which are poisonous when you inhale it in the long term. Yeah. Or the bug spray, which really doesn't really work. Yeah. So it's poisonous, right? Yeah. So the concept that we do, we want to improve the quality of life in terms that it doesn't harm the environment and harm people. Right. So add value to to the quality of life of people of Thailand. That's my definition.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I've known you for a while. That sounds so you, because now whenever I think of Thailand, I actually do think of you first. It's kind of crazy. But we're here in this at an entrepreneur retreat. I kind of want to ask you, when you first thought you were an entrepreneur, believed you were an entrepreneur, when did that first happen?
Funny thing is, I've never thought myself as anything else except the possibility of being an entrepreneur. And this is just because my family has always been into business. My parents, my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my uncle, everyone around me have their own business, their own boss, so to speak. And so I grew up with that around me. So, it's either work for my dad, who is an entrepreneur, which I really didn't want to. I really wanted to do something to prove myself. And then naturally I just did my own thing.
That's funny. It's interesting because I have a similar story, because my dad is the entrepreneur in the family, and I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. And he said I think he always thought that I would take over the business, and I didn't want to be introduced as Richard's son. And I left when I was 16, and it's very unusual in the Indian culture for all that to happen. To leave home at 16 because your parents are with you until you get married. They give you education. It's a different culture. That's so fascinating. So you did your own thing. So what happened? When was that sort of realization that, okay, I'm going to do my own thing?
I've been pre-programmed since I was very young. My parents would tell me, you can study whatever you want. In the end, you're going to come back and work with your father anyway. So I took it and I studied actually applied physics, which is something that I never used from the day that I graduated college. It's a shame, but it's true that I wish I studied something else like business or finance or whatever else. But when I finished college, my mom sent me back to Thailand because we have factories. And back then,
back from
the US, from the US. So I grew up in the US with my mom because she opened up a sales office in the US. And then afterwards, when I finished college, she sent me back to work in the factory with my dad. And I worked with my dad for about a year and hated every single minute of being in a factory. Yeah. And because like us, if we do well, then it's because the elders, the parents, and everybody else has been doing it well. If we screw up, it's our fault. Mm-hmm. And I never liked that idea, and I hate anyway being in a factory because it's so monotonous. Yeah. And I've always loved technology, so after my MBA, then I started researching, and I found an article actually that was commissioned by the U.S. government, the 10 things that's upcoming in Thailand.
Oh, interesting. So you just searched for this on your own. So you just finished your MBA and you're like, I'm gonna look for opportunities. Is that how it went down?
I had a semester when I was studying my MBA. I had a semester at Duke University, right. And back then they used a system called LexisNexis, and we used it as research for one of our the courses that I'm taking. And I thought, maybe I look it up. What's good to do in Thailand, because I know when I go back, I don't want to work with my parents. So I looked it up, and then there it was, the 10 things. I came back, I tried a bunch of things, and one of them stuck, and I've been doing it ever since.
42% of failed small businesses offer products or services that don't bring anything new or useful to the market.
Let's talk about the things you tried, and then let's talk about what stuck. Okay, so what are the stuff that you tried that did not work or partially worked or whatever?
One of them was footwear. my parents we were making shoes. We already had factories making shoes for Nike, for Adidas, for Timberland. But I thought I'd do something else. I tried to do slippers, and the flip flops.
Yeah.
And I tried for a little bit, and I couldn't get traction in it, for example. And then there's a bunch of things in there, and the thing that stuck was healthcare, and medical equipment was actually, the healthcare system was actually about to boom, because the healthcare tourism, after I started, really boomed. So I got involved with healthcare. I got involved with medical instruments, diagnostics products, and
what does that mean? So explain that, because even I couldn't put, like, when you say healthcare equipment, I can't even, like, my brain goes into, like, I don't know, like forceps.
Okay. The things that I got involved with was, the first was blood banking. Somehow I found a contact through family, friends, and then who introduced me to the blood banks, the major blood banks in Thailand. And we worked with, our first product was actually collection of blood. And this is collection of blood, the components of blood. So it's a high-tech separator of blood products that back then was really unique. And so we started off with that. Then we branched off to testing of blood. So testing of HIV, testing of hepatitis, testing of other products. Then to women cervical cancer. Then going back to testing of blood, it went from onto molecular testing. So we went into the testing in the molecular level of the disease of the HIV and hepatitis and so forth. So we got involved in all of that in Thailand, and we were fortunate when we did all of that. We were pretty much on the forefront and working with like really famous company. We used to work with Johnson & Johnson, a division of them. We worked with Novartis Diagnostics. And so forth and all of that.
That's crazy. So what's the journey been from then, right, when you started, to now? I mean, a lot has changed, obviously. You've gotten wiser. You've gotten older. What would you have wished you told your younger self?
As an entrepreneur, I'm more excited about technology and new products. And I'm always searching and looking for interesting technology and so forth. But I did not pay enough attention on the back end. I did not get the check and balance in order. I did not get all the systems and the processes in order. So that was a painful lesson that I went through, and I wish I had put more attention and gotten all of this in order before I expanded, because there's always new business to be made, but without the great and good, I guess, systems, you're just building a house of cards, which when it collapses, it's just a house of cards that just falls right down.
Let's talk about business and systems, because again, I think entrepreneurship is very sexy from the outside. It sounds like a cool thing to do, like when you get a chance to like hang out in these kind of locations and have cool conversations like we're having right now. But there is a whole other side to it, obviously, and we get a chance to share that kind of stuff here. But how does that all sort of fit together as an art? Like, how do you kind of, when you think about systems and processes, like, could you have done it with the resources you had back then, or was it something you put off that you knew, or like, because I think that some people don't even know that they have to build systems and processes.
I had a second in command, and I put a lot of trust in him to put all the systems in place, because he's 10 years older than me, and he had much more experience. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I did not do the proper job of making sure that he did his job.
Right.
And he didn't want to do this job because in the end, we found out that there were fraud committed in our operations and so forth.
Yeah.
And to have all of that systems in place, meaning that the fraud could not have been committed because it would have, they would not have been able to possibly do so.
The system would have caught it or something.
The system would have really caught all of this. So that's why I said what I said about having all the proper systems, the check and balance in place before expanding. Because when you scale, you're basically it's like a race. You are on a constant race running all the time. You're looking forward. You're not looking back.
Yeah.
And if the people in the back are not doing their job, then you have a problem. And I had a problem.
Let's talk about that problem because let's look back there. Because you mentioned fraud. I think every entrepreneur freezes when they hear that. I wouldn't even know how to pick it because I don't know. I don't think that way. I don't think that way at all. Like, how is someone going to do something? And I don't even doesn't even come into my radar. So, and I suppose once bitten, twice shy. So how do you deal with it? Like, how do you deal with something like that? Like when you have, I think more importantly, how did you deal with it? Because it's the injustice, it's the injustice of the whole situation that makes it worse.
I used to trust people. Again, I give people 100%. But now, and I coined this phrase from Tony Robbins, and he said, the word is verifiable trust. I still, you have to give the people who work with you or for you that trust still. But again, the verifiable comes in the systems of check and balance that make sure that they're not doing things that they're not supposed to. So this is the way that I now operate.
How do you create the verifiable trust? How do you create the verification? Like, how do you go down that path? Because relationships is hard.
We have a lot of systems and checks right now that I've installed because we're taking one of our company public next year. So as a public company, you're required to comply, and that compliance meaning that you have to have internal control systems in place. You have to have internal audits, external audits. You have to have all these procedures and to make sure that they're followed.
Yeah.
So all of this was not built when I started the business. If I go back, I would have just done exactly that. And if you remember our common friend Todd Chang, he coined he told me, when he started the business, one of his business, any business that he starts, he built it to sell. So if you're building a business to sell, then what would the buyer require? So so now I'm thinking, if I want to sell or take the company public, then how can I assure the buyer that they're buying the right thing?
Yeah.
So when you think about that in reverse, then you start thinking, okay, I have to install this. Otherwise, they're not going to trust the numbers or what's going on.
So interesting, right?
Yeah.
When and nowadays you hear a lot about lifestyle businesses and people not. And business is an art and as well as a science in the sense that there are black holes in business. You get to 3 million. There's like, if you can't push past that, you'll stay there stagnantly. Like 10, 12 million is another sort of spot there. Then I think there's like 50 million is probably another spot. There's all these little holes because resources need to be added in a certain way, and like the scaling is not as like a linear curve. What are your thoughts on that? Because you've got 1,500 employees?
Yeah, just about through all my operations.
That's crazy. That's crazy that Do you realize that there are so many people? Do you feel the weight of that?
I didn't actually think about that until all the problems started. Because once the problem started, then I think about, if the people who were working for me, I have to fire them, what will they do? Because each of them will have people that they need to support, their parents, their family, their wives, their children. Now that I think about it, and I'm thinking about it, that's a responsibility that I need to be the custodian of, I guess, their success. Mm-hmm. That's what I feel my job is as well, not to only for the shareholders, but now I'm looking at all the stakeholders. So the stakeholders are not only the employees, but the families of the employees. And that's a very interesting viewpoint when I look at and analyze.
What comes up when you think of that and you look back and you look at that and you kind of realize that there's such a huge ecosystem that you've built?
If I have known or thought about it in the beginning, I would have been much more cautious, because every step that I take forward means that I'm more responsible. I feel more responsible for those who trust me. And those who work for me, I believe they come to work for me because they have a certain trust in me or in what I stand for or what we're building. And for me to only look at one side, which is just to push forward all the time without looking at the back end of the business, I feel that I did not do them proper justice, that I have been a little bit more irresponsible, or a lot more irresponsible than I have to be, than I need to be.
Why do you feel that? I mean, hindsight is always 20/20. You can always look back and think, I could have done this differently. I should have done this differently. But would you have known? It's only now that you might have known.
I guess if it's true, and this is in hindsight. But if I built the business and think about the exits before I start, then things will be handled differently. And I thought I would build a business, and I never really looked at the exits or the end. So it goes back to the 7 habits, I guess. Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind.
Right.
And that's a great lesson. And I read the book, I took his class, and I didn't really internalize that until now.
But how would you know what the end is? I mean, would you have known that the business would become like this when you started it?
I think for all entrepreneurs, we are a little bit gung-ho. We only look the positives. Otherwise, we would be too scared to do business. But a business is a life. It has a life. It will end one day. The ending could be that it's purchased and merged into a bigger corporation, or most common is that it will go bust. And most entrepreneurs will go bust. So how to prepare for that ending, to make sure that it's a graceful end, not a horrendous ending, is important.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Our aim with this audio documentary has always been to build a strong community of entrepreneurs and creatives to provide a space where they can use their voice to share their authenticity with the world. As a valued listener, your voice matters too. We love to hear your feedback and ideas, so don't be shy to let us know how we're doing in the ratings and comments. If you have a message for our production team or know someone who would be a perfect fit as a guest, you can find out more information on how to share your input at psychologyofontrepreneurship.com.
The ending, right? You talk about the ending, the graceful ending. How would you start a business today if you had an opportunity to get into another business, for example?
I think as all of us do, we think about the value that we add. Whatever business you start needs to have value. And it has to be a substantial amount of value that you add to your product or service. Otherwise, people would not buy or subscribe to your product or service in the first place. And when you have that I guess that concept of the value that you add to the business, then you start constructing the framework. How does it work? The business work. I think about what I need to do to get to the point for the clients to buy or subscribe to that product or service.
Yeah.
And then you have to build the ecosystem around it. Fortunately, I have the back end now. So all I need to think about is to look into, okay, so how do I move forward? How do I market the product? How do I educate the consumer or the clients? How do I do the sales? And most of my products are really not B2C, it's more B2B.
Right.
So how do I approach the B2B clients? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to approach? How do I need to get their attention and so forth? And all of that is a process in itself.
Yeah.
And that's how I start. And any of my business, there's no overnight success. I've never found a single product or service that I created that is overnight. Some will take 2-3 years at the least. Some have taken me 6-7 years to get traction. I mean, I just kind of have to have faith and believe in the concept of what I'm trying to value, that I'm trying to give. Because if and it's hard. It's not easy because you go through a lot of obstacles in the way. You have a lot of challenges as an entrepreneur to do anything, right? So that's the way that I do my business.
When someone thinks about graceful exits, I suppose, or graceful endings, as you put it, one would only think about it ending as a sale. Like, is there a way that you think about what if this doesn't work? Is there a line? Because you also mentioned how we're quite optimistic. We don't look at certain things. How would you do it?
I think this is a lot like angel investing or startups. You really look at your business. Okay, so what's your walk away point? And I usually set my walk away point into, if I don't achieve the certain milestone by a certain time, then I'll pull the plug. I have to realize, and I realize that, and we have this, as an entrepreneur, I have this tendency that I want to go just a little bit more. But through my experiences, that little bit more is a waste of time and resource that I should put into something else that can grow. So I have to put a limit, either it be a time frame, a monetary value, blah blah blah. Just depending on whatever I'm trying to do.
But you hear people say this all the time, right? They say the night's the darkest before the dawn. Keep pushing until the end. The people who fail more often are the ones that ultimately succeed. There's all these different. How do you consolidate that?
I think a lot of that has to do with, I don't want to say wishful thinking, right? It's easy just to say what you just said, but to get to that position, to I guess to incorporate that value of what the meaning behind what you said, there are other things you have to consider. Is your business plan correct? Is the value you're adding truly a value? And it's not a value in the mind of the entrepreneur. You have to look at it from the mind of the consumer or the people who will buy your product or service. Right. And a lot of time, we as entrepreneur look at it only from our perspective. We don't take their perspective. And once we get caught up into believing our story, and we believe that our product or service is the best in the world, and we get frustrated, and I get frustrated. Why aren't the people buying? Why aren't they subscribing? This is fantastic for them. Yeah. But I have to go back and think, okay, so from what their perspective, what do they see? Are we a must or a should have or a good to have? And if we are a must to have, then why aren't they buying? Is it because the price point is too high? Is there an alternative to what we do? Is there is it whatever it is that the consumer or the clients are thinking in their frame? So that's a very essential thing for me to look at, not from my perspective, but from their perspective.
Okay, so let's move into like mindset, and let's move into what goes on inside your brain, emotionally, spiritually, I suppose. What's that been like for you as an entrepreneur? I mean, since starting, it's obviously been a lot of ups and downs, and generally, trending in the upward direction, I suppose. What goes on in your brain? Let's break that down first.
Yeah, I just went through a very, very, I'm still going through a very, very difficult period of time. Yeah. And I have to coin this phrase again. I have to go back to Tony Robbins because I got a lot from him. That things doesn't happen to you, but it happens for you. So when all of this happens to me, instead of looking or blaming why me, I look at the things, okay, so what do I learn from this? What is this lesson teaching me? Or is the universe or whatever trying to push me, to tell me to go somewhere, do something, be someone? And I have found that by looking at things from that viewpoint, I have sought out and try and worked on self-improvement to I guess up-level myself to who I need to be to overcome all of these challenges.
So when you think about who you need to be to overcome these challenges, when you become that person, there's more challenges that come with it. So there's no real stopping point.
I believe that life is, we as human beings, we are meant to go through life to learn. And it's an endless cycle of learning. So I don't take it as a negative or a bad way. I just take it that, okay, I am being taught something that I need to know. And then looking at the lesson itself, these are good lessons. It's not, even though it's painful, I'm by all means, it's absolutely painful when I have many, many nights that I can't sleep at all. But looking in hindsight, that it really makes you stronger. And the best thing for me is that, all these lessons are the lessons that will be able to pass on to my children. And they're my why. They're the reason why I want to be the best version of myself, so that I can be an example for them to follow, and as well as a mentor for them to learn without having to go through all these things. Of course, they'll go through their own life challenges, but just that if they learn from the mistakes that I've made, they don't have to go through this kind of issues, and they can be fully present to face whatever the issues that they will face for their lives.
Motivational speaker Jim Rohn once said that the world's most successful people are lifelong learners, stating that formal education will make you a living, while self-education will make you a fortune.
I mean, it's every parent's mission, I suppose, is to save their kid from the life that they never got a chance to lead or wanted to lead or whatever else, right? So it's always like, I know for a fact that my parents did sacrifice a lot for us, my sister and I, and my parents only got a chance to live this kind of life, I don't know, a lot later on in their life. But you mentioned not sleeping, and I think that's a common entrepreneurial symptom. What happens? What goes on in your head? I mean, no details, but what happens? What goes on in your head when, you can't sleep?
I think I'm not living the now. I'm not present into today. I'm projecting into the future in the worst case scenario, in things that hasn't happened yet. And it's natural. All humans, we're like that. And but to get caught up into that, and it's difficult. It's not easy at all to not worry about the future, about things that hasn't happened yet. But when I get caught up into that, then I have that sleepless nights that I worry. To answer your question.
Yeah. So when you talk about projection, right? I mean, it's quite easy to kind of go, well, if I don't think about this and it happens, I'm not prepared for it, right? And then you think about it, but you think about it over and over again.
For me, it's not thinking about I'm thinking about the consequence when I don't sleep, when, what will happen if things fail, blah, blah, blah. I think the best for me that I've found to work is that I think about what I need to do my best in preparation for whatever challenge it is. Yeah. And then, adjust when the situation comes. And for me to just worry about the consequence I find it doesn't help. Yeah. And it's just a waste of my energy. And I'm just saying this, and I'm not saying that I can do it, because I do get caught up in being in that stage, many times. But I have to actively pull myself back and say, okay, instead of worrying about that, what can I do today? Yeah. What I need to do, this week, what I need to do this month. What I need to do this year. So it helps me, it's like a two-sided of a coin. Instead of looking at the bad side, you look at the things that you need to prepare, then at least for me, I'm able to objectively analyze the actions that I will need to take, the plans that I need to do to prepare for whatever challenges I'm facing. So I guess my thing is, prepare for the worst, but fight all I can for the best. I don't hope for the best. I fight every single step of the way to make sure that the best happens.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. And because you said that, and that's something I'm going to write down. But because you said that, and you mentioned how important your kids are and your why. What is the biggest piece of it? What is the one thing you just wish that they understood? Not know, because you can give them information, but what is the one thing you wish that they truly just understood?
Life is not only about being happy, but it's more about the impact that you make to yourselves, to those around you, and to the world. And in the end, I believe that we're only memories. And what kind of memories do they want to leave to their children or the people around them when they pass on? So that's what I would like my children to think about in whatever they do.
I'm glad I asked you the question because it just came from your heart. Something you mentioned, and it's about culture in your talk. You mentioned about how in your culture you don't show your belly, and I found that really interesting, right? Because first of all, explain that as a cultural norm. Can you?
When I said that and thinking about that, I don't think it's only for Thai people or Chinese people, with the face saving and all of that. I think it's more, even Americans or Europeans or anywhere, that we don't want to appear vulnerable. We would like, when you're on your Facebook, you're not going to post all the suffering you go through, right? Or Instagram, you're going to post everything that's good, right? And that's the tendency, I think, is that everyone does. So for me also is to be that vulnerable, to show my belly, to show my problems. It's like, you're showing that the shame that you feel or your failure. And that is, I guess, that is not something that most people are comfortable doing.
No, I agree. But how awesome, and in a controlled environment, how awesome it is.
It is.
When it happens, because brother, I could feel the whole room listening to you, and not listening to you. We were witnessing you. It was so different. I'm actually quite happy we got a chance to spend this time together in pockets. And even though we met last year, I think you're one of the most humble people I have met. No one knows how big a company and how much of an impact you make. And I think you like it that way in some weird fashion. But when you look back and you think, we can talk about all the great things you've achieved and all the stuff that you've gone and conquered and the marathons that you've run. When you look back, what are the highlights of your life? What are the ones that you wish people mentioned?
I only want people to remember the impact I have on their lives. I don't really care for them to remember the success or materialistic things. Again, going back to that, we are only memories, and I want the people to remember me in the way that, okay, this person, what he's done, or the lessons that he's able to pass on, help me meaning that person, in a significant way with my life, with their life. I think that's how I would prefer to be remembered, not for the success, but for what I'm able to make an impact for whoever knows me.
Okay, finally, before we wrap up, biggest accomplishments when you look back?
We've helped monopoly of in Thailand. Virtual monopoly is, monopoly isn't really allowed, but we hold a virtual monopoly in many business for a certain period of time, because of and we lost it through technology change. But I've gone monopoly for blood testing of HIV and so forth twice. With the mosquito traps, we have also, we were the pioneer. We were the only one who did that. With the natural gas transport, we are still the largest, company doing that in the country, and I believe probably Southeast Asia. And my trucks goes around from the Earth to the Moon and back every year about almost 50 times. Oh my God. A total amount of distance that we travel.
That is great. That, I think I might name this episode or volume that, because that is such a cool stat. So let's say that again. Your trucks travel in a year 50 times to the Moon and back.
Yeah, the number of trucks and the number of, in total, the distance that we travel each year, and this is only in Thailand, from the Earth to the Moon and back, about 50 times.
Brother, this has been such. I'm glad I got a chance to do this, and I'm thank you for letting me pop your cherry to be the first one to interview you, because I know for a fact there'll be a bunch of people now that will come and interview you. Thank you so much for your time. What more importantly, thank you for your friendship and the attention you give me. I like what you see in me. I like witnessing that through you, if that makes any sense.
I'm very touched, moved, and very humbled. And I am honored to be your friend.
Thank you, Noom. Thank you.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship. Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I would have preferred not to have this challenge if you had the choice. But the challenge is here, and we just got to accept that it is a challenge. It's going to be a major thing. When you've been married 40 years, it's really important you get on well together, which might be really obvious. If there's one thing in an organisation that's really important, it's that. It's not just about numbers. It's not just about making money.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I interviewed Noom because he's a leading entrepreneur in Thailand and across the globe and leads a large team of people. He has the kindest heart and is also passionate about lots of things, including the welfare of the people of Thailand. He is at a point where his company is looking to be listed on the Thai Stock Exchange. This is his first podcast interview and said that he didn't know what value he could offer. Noom is a legend, a connected father, loving husband, and he is my friend.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
This is a Must Amplify production. Special thanks to every guest expert that has appeared on the show. Editing, voiceovers, and sound design by Kaylee Bunnyman and Tiago Vega. Guest research and content by Claire Gould and Corinne Castles. Project managed by Kaylee Bunnyman. Produced and hosted by me, Ronsley Vaz. For more episodes and where to listen, go to mustamplify.com/POE.
Love the polished audio docuseries style of this podcast, The Psychology of Entrepreneurship? At We Are Podcast, you can learn how to create a similar style for your own show. This revolutionary virtual event assembles podcasters, entrepreneurs, and marketers in one spot, so you're able to learn from the masters. Head straight to wearepodcast.com to reserve your spot at our next event.